Here is a heartbreaking detail in Interstellar that few people mention. On Miller's planet, a tick-tock sound can be heard constantly in the background music, with each interval lasting exactly 1.25 seconds. Since this planet is close to a black hole, for every hour spent here, 7 years pass on Earth. Therefore, based on calculations, every single tick corresponds to an entire day on Earth. In other words, every click you hear represents the passing of 24 hours back home. Director Christopher Nolan uses this minimalist yet brutal method to press the weight of time directly onto the audience's heart. This is why when Cooper sees his daughter Murph again, she is already a gray-haired elderly woman while her father remains young. When the father and daughter hold hands, that scene moves countless viewers to tears. Beyond this detail, Nolan buried nearly 30 Easter eggs in Interstellar. In this video, I will take you through the entire movie from start to finish. Additionally, I will reference The Science of Interstellar by Nobel Prize-winning physicist Kip Thorne to break down those complex theories. For instance, what exactly is the fifth dimension? Why does time flow at different speeds on different planets? What is the essential difference between a wormhole and a black hole? And what is the ultimate truth at the end of the movie? The film's opening shot features the massive dust storms that everyone remembers so vividly. Many people assume this is movie CGI, but it actually isn't. These images are mostly drawn from the 2012 documentary The Dust Bowl, depicting a disaster that really happened. In the 1930s, the central United States experienced a similar Dust Bowl crisis, where the land was destroyed and crops failed on a massive scale. Nolan incorporated this real history into a futuristic setting to convince the audience that this isn't just made-up sci-fi, but a disaster that could happen around us at any moment. Even more detailed is that the flying dust in the movie wasn't created by effects. It was filmed on set using high-powered fans blowing specially made food particles. This method of not relying on computer effects is Nolan's consistent philosophy. If it can be filmed practically, never use pure CGI. As for that vast cornfield, do you think that was special effects too? Wrong. That was actually over 3,000 acres of corn truly planted by the crew. After filming wraps, Nolan directly sells the corn, turning it into production funds. In that cornfield, Cooper takes Murph and Tom to chase a drone. On the surface, it's just a low-altitude flying device, but in reality, it was attracted to Cooper's vicinity due to a gravitational anomaly. Even more magically, the flying shots of the drone in this scene were all filmed practically without using any CG effects. Nolan insisted on making the images the audience sees as real as possible. Does that reshape your perception a bit? And this is just the beginning. Next, the scene shifts to Cooper taking Murph to school. Here is a small detail. Did you notice the equation on the paper? It displays the number 5, yet 6 lines are drawn. Although this scene flashes by, it actually hints that the school is instilling incorrect knowledge. In the movie's setting, the education system revolves entirely around how to be a good farmer, and the teacher even advises Cooper's son, Tom, not to think about college.
Okay, well, right now, we don't need more engineers. We didn't run out of television screens and planes. We ran out of food. The world needs farmers. Good farmers, like you and Tom.
Uneducated farmers.
We're a caretaker generation, Coop, and things are getting better.
Even more absurdly, they tell the children that the Apollo moon landing was faked.
You don't believe we went to the moon?
I believe it was a brilliant piece of propaganda that the Soviets bankrupted themselves, pouring resources into rockets and other useless machines.
Useless machines.
And if we don't want a repeat of the excess and wastefulness of the 20th century, then we need to teach our kids about this planet, not tales of leaving it.
Why? The goal is to make the children give up hope, obediently become farmers, focus on farming, and stop fantasizing about flying to space. The tractors drawn by children on the wall are the most direct hint. Future society doesn't need scientists, it needs labor. While this plot point seems like just a setting, Nolan is actually satirizing reality. When a society only cares about surviving, no one dares to look up at the stars anymore. The truly terrifying apocalypse isn't the destruction of a planet, but humanity losing the courage to explore the future. When Murph and Cooper return home, they see books on the shelf falling automatically. Looking at the empty gaps, Murph discovers it is actually a set of Morse code. She then tells her father that a ghost did this, and it likely wants to convey some message, but Cooper doesn't take it seriously and turns to leave. You might think this is a supernatural event, but actually, this is one of the most important foreshadowings in the entire movie. We only learn at the end that the so-called ghost is actually Cooper himself from the future. After falling into the black hole, he is placed by higher dimensional beings into a 4-dimensional library, where he uses gravity to influence the real world, leaving behind signals resembling Morse code. So, The book's falling from the shelf at the beginning is actually Cooper returning to the past from the future, trying to communicate with his daughter. It can be said that the falling of this book is both the beginning of the story and its answer. But Cooper doesn't believe it at first. It isn't until the next day, when a dust storm hits and he and Murph are closing the window, that he notices the dust in the room has formed lines. After some observation, Cooper discovers this is a set of coordinates written in binary. Following this clue, the father and daughter drive to an abandoned site, only to discover that it is actually a secret NASA facility. This base, once incredibly glorious, is now like an abandoned bunker hidden deep underground. Inside the base, Cooper meets Professor Brand. Through conversation, we learn that Cooper was originally a top NASA pilot, but he went home to farm because of an accident. In the NASA conference room, you can see a small Easter egg. A Lazarus project patch hangs on the wall, along with photos of 12 astronauts. The director deliberately blurred this shot because among them is Matt Damon, who plays Dr. Mann, the only one to appear later. To maintain secrecy, the production team kept it undisclosed right up until the film's release. It turns out that 10 years ago, NASA predicted Earth wouldn't last much longer, so they sent 12 astronauts through a wormhole to different planets. Their mission was to explore candidate planets suitable for human habitation and transmit data back. But in the end, only 3 planets sent back signals indicating potential habitability. NASA called this operation the Lazarus Project. This name wasn't chosen at random. In the Bible, Lazarus is the man resurrected by Jesus, and in the movie, the meaning of this project is to resurrect the entire human race. Professor Brand then tells Cooper they must now assemble a new team of astronauts to go verify these 3 planets. But there is a detail here. Professor Brand proposes 2 plans. Plan A: solve the gravity equation and take all humans on Earth away using massive space stations. Plan B: if the equation can't be solved, simply take 5,000 frozen human embryos to a new planet to repopulate. Meanwhile, Earth and all humans on it wait for destruction. It sounds cold, but this is the ruthlessness of science and reality. To reach those 3 potentially habitable planets, the astronauts must cross several galaxies. Under normal circumstances, this journey would take thousands of years. So, here is the question. How does the spaceship Endurance do it? The answer is a wormhole, which acts like a shortcut through space-time. There is a very vivid analogy here. If you view the universe as an apple, you can crawl slowly across the surface like an ant to get to the other side. But if you bore a hole through the middle, you can arrive instantly. This is the essence of a wormhole. More critically, if it is large enough for a spaceship to pass through, it implies some intelligent life built it. NASA calls these mysterious beings them.
They?
And whoever they are, they appear to be looking out for us. That wormhole lets us travel to other stars. Came along right as we needed it.
They've put potentially habitable worlds right within our reach.
The wormhole is positioned near Saturn, which wasn't chosen randomly. In mythology, Saturn symbolizes agriculture and time, perfectly corresponding to the movie's 2 main themes: the food crisis where humanity faces extinction, and the ruthless struggle against time. Before leaving, Cooper and Murph have a farewell scene, which is one of the biggest tearjerkers in the movie. Little Murph cries and begs her father not to leave, but Cooper takes out a watch and gives it to her.
I mean, by the time I get back, we might even be the same age. You and me. What? Imagine that.
You have no idea when you're coming back. No idea! Oh!
This gesture seems comforting, but it actually foreshadows the cruel passage of time that follows. As Cooper turns to close the door and leave, another book falls from the shelf. This scene is also one of the most critical foreshadowings in the entire film, and the plot will return to it later. Cooper eventually boards the Endurance.
9. Main engine start. 4.
From here, Interstellar enters the real interstellar journey. First, a detail. The Endurance has 12 module sections. If you look closely, doesn't it look a bit like a giant clock face? The 12 pods are arranged in a ring, just like the 12 markers on a clock. This is not a coincidence. The director intentionally creates a resonance between the spaceship and time. Even the watch Cooper gives Murph, which appears throughout the film, is a form of resonance. After all, the core theme of the entire movie is time. The name Endurance also hides deep meaning. It pays homage to British explorer Ernest Shackleton's ship, Endurance, which once sailed for Antarctica. In 1914, Shackleton led a team across the Antarctic, but the ship was trapped in ice and eventually sank. However, the crew survived miraculously through resilience and mutual support. Therefore, this ship symbolizes the courage of humanity to explore the unknown and the will to survive in extreme environments. The design of the Endurance wasn't just concept art. For filming, Nolan actually built a massive and incredibly detailed model of the spaceship. So, the actors were filming on a practical set, not acting against a green screen. The director even insisted on using projections to display outer space imagery directly outside the ship's portholes, so the actors would see the real universe. This made their performances more natural. The ship also features two very unique robots, TARS and CASE. Their design was inspired by the Black Monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey. They look blocky at first glance, yet can split into 4 mechanical arms, with a level of flexibility that's almost unimaginable. These two robots aren't CGI either. They are wooden and metal models operated by puppeteers, with some digital effects added in post-production. So in the movie, you feel that TARS and CASE have real weight and presence. There is another cool detail. When the camera cuts to exterior space shots, you notice almost no sound can be heard. Nolan insisted on adhering to scientific principles here. Sound cannot travel in space. Thus, the film presents a cold, silent universe. Some shots are even filmed as if an action camera was strapped to the outside of the ship, completely immersing the audience in that lonely and dangerous environment. Can you feel how hardcore the details in this film are? It's not just telling a story, it wants you to believe this journey really happened. After some flight time, the ship finally arrives in Saturn's orbit. This is when the audience sees the true appearance of the wormhole for the first time. Interestingly, most people think a wormhole is a flat circle, but in Interstellar, it is designed as a massive sphere, looking like a crystal ball suspended in the universe, reflecting the galaxy on the other side on its surface. The director handled it this way to align with science. In a 3-dimensional world, a circle is actually a cross-section of a sphere, so a wormhole should visually appear spherical, not as a flat ring. Science Officer Romilly also provides an explanation in the film. The process of the ship traversing the wormhole is even more stunning. As the Endurance charges into the wormhole, the entire space looks like a crumpled mirror, with the image constantly distorting. To capture this effect, Nolan's team actually used Einstein's field equations combined with ray tracing algorithms to calculate and render the images. So the wormhole imagery you see isn't just visual design, but a simulation truly built on scientific calculations. The moment the ship crosses the wormhole, the actors' expressions are spot on because they are truly looking at the wormhole imagery projected outside the window, not a green screen. So those reactions of fear and awe are all genuine emotions. This sequence essentially tells the audience that we are no longer spectators, but are being sucked into unknown space-time along with the Endurance. During the flight, Brand suddenly notices a distorted space-time appearing outside the window, within which a transparent hand appears. Brand can't help but reach out to touch it. This is also a foreshadowing for the entire film. We learn later that the hand is actually the future Cooper. After passing through the wormhole, they arrive in a new galaxy. The most conspicuous thing here is the massive black hole, Gargantua. This name comes from a giant in literature, symbolizing its endless desire to devour everything. Interestingly, the image of the black hole in this movie became almost the most realistic black hole simulation in human history. The director hired Nobel Prize-winning physicist Kip Thorne as a scientific consultant. They fed complex equations into supercomputers to render the images. However, rendering just a single frame required dozens or even hundreds of hours of calculation. Therefore, the black hole's accretion disk is scientifically calculated, not art randomly rendered by effects. In the end, Kip Thorne even wrote a scientific paper based on the film's visual effects and published it in an academic journal. It can be said that Interstellar is not just a movie, but also contributed a real piece of scientific research. But the black hole brings not only awe, but also cruelty. The first target they choose to explore is Miller's planet, which orbits Gargantua. In such a powerful gravitational field, time here is completely stretched. Simply put, 1 hour on Miller's planet equals 7 years on Earth. This isn't sci-fi fabrication, but a real deduction from Einstein's theory of general relativity. Space and time are like a stretched fabric. The more massive the celestial body, the deeper it presses into the fabric, so time flows slower in that vicinity. The most intuitive example of this theory is GPS satellites. In different gravitational environments, their time flow isn't exactly the same as on the ground, so scientists must constantly calibrate them, or the navigation system would go haywire. Back on Miller's planet, the surface looks like shallow water at a glance, resembling a boundless ocean. But the real threat is the giant waves that shoot straight into the sky. They are higher than the clouds, like moving walls of tsunamis. Kip Thorne offers two possible explanations in his book. First, the planet is stretched into a football shape due to its proximity to the black hole, and the ocean oscillates due to gravity to form giant waves. Second, the black hole's gravity simply creates super tsunamis directly. Either way, the result is that this place is destined to be uninhabitable. Filming this scene was extremely hardcore. The crew filmed in Iceland, where the water was bone-chillingly cold, and lead actress Anne Hathaway almost suffered from hypothermia. As for the lander that lands on the sea surface, the crew really built a 1-to-1 full-scale model. The shot where it gets swallowed by the giant wave is a perfect combination of practical effects and CGI. On Miller's planet, a stay of just a few hours translates to a long 23 years for Earth. When they finally make it back to the Endurance, Romilly, who stayed behind, already has a white beard, having waited alone on the ship for decades. In this instant, the cruelty of time weighs heavily on everyone's heart. Cooper sits in the cockpit watching video messages sent from Earth. That scene is almost one of the most heart-wrenching in the entire film. He watches helplessly as his son Tom goes from a boy to a young man, then to a middle-aged farmer with a stubbly face. His son Tom farms while building a family, recording videos of his own children's birth and growth to send over. But by the last recording, bad news arrives. The child didn't survive. This pain that spans space-time leaves Cooper silently shedding tears. Meanwhile, the grown-up Murph has become Professor Brand's assistant. She is still brilliant and still stubborn, but she can never forgive her father for leaving. The first voice message she leaves is a cold interrogation.
Today's my birthday, and it's a special one because you once told me that when you came back we might be the same age. And today I'm the age you were when you left. So it might be a real good time for you to come back.
Just as the audience is immersed in the cruelty of time on Miller's planet, the plot suddenly drops a bombshell truth. The promised Plan A was a lie from the start. On his deathbed, Professor Brand finally confesses that the equation is unsolvable. This means humanity never had a chance to leave Earth as a whole. The only real plan is Plan B. Take the frozen human embryos to a new planet to restart civilization. As for the billions of people on Earth, they can only wait for death. This means Professor Brand has been deceiving the researchers, the astronauts, and even his own daughter all along. And the reason Cooper is willing to embark on this journey is that Professor Brand manipulates him through his paternal love, making him believe he can return home and save Murph, so he is willing to risk his life on this unknown expedition. This truth hits Murph like a crushing blow, and she realizes that the day her father left was, in fact, the beginning of her being used as a discarded pawn. At that moment, the audience feels angry and despairing along with her. Murph then tearfully questions her father.
You knew this was all a sham. You left us here to starve, to suffocate. Did my father know too? I just want to know if you left me here to die. I just have to know.
Far away in space, Cooper remains silent. This silence is more piercing than any explosion because he truly didn't know, but he did indeed leave his daughter and go on a journey of no return. This is Nolan's most ruthless point. True despair isn't the disaster itself, but the moment hope is exposed as false. At the same time, the Endurance is running low on fuel, and they must make a final choice between the remaining two planets. Ultimately, they set their sights on Dr. Mann's planet. Can this man, once hailed as the smartest of humans, really bring hope? When the Endurance successfully arrives at Dr. Mann's planet, Mann, who has been trapped alone for over a decade, is emotional and teary-eyed upon seeing his companions again. Everyone is relieved at first, but the truth is soon exposed. This planet is completely uninhabitable, and the so-called migration data was all faked by Mann himself. Why? Because he was alone for too long. In that environment of despair, he would rather lie to trick others into coming to keep him company than wait to die alone. This is the most fragile side of human nature. The film poses a cold question here. If it were you, trapped for decades, would you make the same choice? However, even darker things lie ahead. Not only did Mann lie, but he also attempts to eliminate Cooper. He takes Cooper to a valley under the pretense of exploration, then suddenly attacks him halfway.
I'm sorry! I can't let you leave with that ship! We're gonna need it to complete the mission!
The director deliberately filmed this fight scene to look clumsy, with no flashy action choreography, just two scientists fighting for their lives in a desperate situation. Because this isn't a superhero movie, it's the most fragile side of humanity. In the end, Cooper survives by luck and is rescued by Brand. But Mann's madness isn't over. He steals a small craft and attempts to forcibly dock with the Endurance, but due to an operational error, he causes the ship to explode directly.
It is nuts!
The spacecraft spins out of control in space, forcing Cooper to rely on his top-tier piloting skills, focus completely, and pull off a forced docking. This scene really puts your heart in your throat. The screen is filled only with the rotation of ship against ship, combined with Hans Zimmer's music, with a rhythm so urgent it's suffocating.
3 degrees starboard, Cooper.
Ultimately, Cooper uses his elite piloting skills to forcefully pull the Endurance back. At that moment, you realize he isn't someone chosen by fate, but a pilot who is truly terrifyingly skilled. However, the crisis isn't over. Fuel is hitting bottom, and the Endurance has no way back. They must come up with a final solution. Finally, Cooper proposes a crazy plan. Use the black hole as a slingshot. They will fling the ship toward the black hole Gargantua, using gravity to gain one last acceleration to shoot toward Edmund's planet. But the problem is, the ship is too heavy. If they don't lighten the load, they can't escape even with the black hole's power. So Cooper makes a decision. He quietly cuts the connection and drops himself and the robot TARS into the black hole together. This scene is his ultimate sacrifice for all humanity. As the ship falls into the black hole Gargantua, the visuals instantly become eerie and magnificent. Outside is pitch black, but inside flashes with countless lights, as if time and space are twisted into an invisible web. Nolan gives no specific explanation here because science still knows nothing about the interior of a black hole. This unknown makes the movie even more stunning. At this moment, the biggest suspense buried in the film is finally revealed. Cooper didn't die, but fell into a mysterious space, the so-called fifth dimension, also known as the tesseract. This part is simply the soul of the entire film. Here, time is no longer a single straight line, but a physicalized scene. The past, present, and future exist simultaneously, like corridors you can touch. Cooper sees countless moments of his daughter Murph, from when she was little to when she grew up, all stacked together. But Cooper cannot walk over directly. He can only use gravity to influence reality. Then, with Tars's reminder, he finally understands the truth. The so-called them aren't aliens, but future humans who have evolved into higher dimensional beings. It was they who built this space and sent Cooper in because only the father-daughter love between Cooper and Murph could allow information to cross space-time. TARS also obtains crucial quantum data here, which is exactly the missing part of Professor Brand's equation. With it, humanity has a chance to truly solve Plan A and leave Earth. But the problem is, the data can't be transmitted directly. So Cooper decides to transmit it to his daughter Murph, using gravity. Therefore, the books falling from the shelf one by one and the patterns formed by dust at the beginning of the movie are all Cooper transmitting information to his daughter via Morse code across dimensions. And Murph is indeed very smart. She actually successfully deciphers the message he conveyed, such as stay. But the past cannot be changed, and Cooper can only pound on the bookshelf in anger and despair, trying to attract his own attention with falling books. But the Cooper of that time still leaves resolutely. Fortunately, a turning point appears. The watch enters the scene. Remember? Cooper gave a watch to his daughter before leaving Earth, and now it is through this watch that Cooper transmits the data from the black hole's singularity bit by bit. Behind every tick of the second hand lies complex quantum information. This isn't an ordinary gift from a father to a daughter, but the key to saving all of humanity. Meanwhile, the grown-up Murph suddenly realizes that her father never left. She walks to the bookshelf and picks up that watch. When she sees the second hand twitching abnormally, she immediately understands that this is her father communicating with her. Tears streaming down her face, she finally realizes that the ghost was Cooper all along. With this data, Murph solves the equation that Professor Brand couldn't complete in his lifetime. For the first time, humanity truly possesses the possibility to leave Earth. She sees hope in despair. The love between father and daughter also sublimates at this moment into the power that saves all mankind. This is also what Nolan wants to tell the audience. Science is great, but what truly drives humanity forward isn't just cold equations, but the bonds between people, especially that love which spans space-time. After the quantum data is successfully transmitted, the structure of the tesseract begins to collapse bit by bit. They have completed their mission and no longer maintain this space. Amidst flashes of intense light, Cooper sees a scene. The Endurance is traveling through the wormhole, and Brand reaches out a hand. It turns out the transparent hand shadow she saw in the wormhole back then was the future Cooper. He is then ejected. You might think he would be swallowed by the black hole, but on the contrary, when he opens his eyes again, he finds himself lying in a massive ring-shaped space station. He has been saved by future humans. This is the new home for all humanity, Cooper Station. Why is it named that? Because the equation that saved humanity was solved by Murph, so to honor her, the entire space station is named after her family name. The design inspiration for this space station isn't made up either. It comes from the O'Neill cylinder proposed by scientists in the 1970s. You see a stunning sight. Beneath people's feet is land, and overhead is also curved land and houses. The space station generates artificial gravity through rotation, allowing humans to live just as they did on Earth. This is a space colonization concept proposed by scientists in the 1970s, now brought directly to the big screen by Nolan. Cooper walks down the corridor, passing a monument standing along the way, inscribed with Lazarus and Endurance. Those names, once thought to be lost in space, have now become witnesses to history. Professor Brand's favorite poem to recite is also engraved on the monument. Here, it finally has a new meaning. The most moving reunion happens at this moment. When Cooper pushes open the hospital room door, he sees his daughter Murph, whose hair is already full of white, while he remains young. This is the most intuitive relativity and the most heart-wrenching scene in the movie. For Cooper, it was just a short journey, but for Murph, it was a lifetime of waiting. At that moment, the father and daughter's hands finally clasp together again, and the audience breaks down in tears at this scene. But Murph soon asks her father to leave, saying she knows that between her father and Brand, there is another bond and connection. On the other side, Brand has finally arrived at Edmund's planet. She steps off the ship alone, takes off her helmet, and takes a deep breath. The air is breathable, meaning this planet can truly become humanity's new home. But at the same time, she is digging a grave for Edmunds. This former explorer likely died long ago in the passage of time. In this desolate new world, only Brand is left alone. But this lonely scene symbolizes a new beginning for humanity. Like the prophecy of Adam and Eve, she and the humans arriving in the future will become the beginning of this new world. At this point, the film finally ties all the threads together. Science explains wormholes, black holes, and time dilation. Philosophy raises questions about humanity's future and fate. But what truly runs through it all is love. From start to finish, Interstellar is telling one thing: humanity's power isn't just wisdom and technology, but that emotion which spans dimensions and space-time. It is the love between father and daughter that allows the quantum data to transfer successfully. It is the belief in emotion that pushes humanity out of a desperate situation. Just like that line from Brand. It sounds like a romantic verse, but in the movie, it becomes the most hardcore truth. When you finish watching this movie, maybe it doesn't matter if you didn't understand many of the scientific details, but you will definitely be hit by the emotions and beliefs it conveys. This is what Nolan wanted. It's not just an adventure about the universe, but a profound exploration of the human heart.